Well, I was sincerely hoping it would not come to this, but Total War Warhammer 3 is being delayed. Creative Assembly just went live on their social media accounts with an announcement that 2021 is no longer in the cards and that early 2022 is the new target, which functionally means this will be anywhere from a 3 to 6 month setback. We don't have an official release date yet, it's just early 2022, but we can make some guesses about how things are going to go down from here. Obviously, this has major implications for the future of the series and content creators on this platform, so let's talk about the good that can come from this delay, the negative impacts of the decision, and how this will affect channels like my own, and where we will go from here. Now, before you head over to the comment section to vent your rage over this horrible news, cursing the gods for this betrayal after a long month starved of content, you should probably know that the global grand reveal of Far Cathay, a project I feel very much attached to, will be happening tomorrow. The very first time the far east of the Warhammer world is being shown to the unwashed masses, and I could not be more excited for it. I'm honestly expecting hype levels similar to Vampire Coast, which was one of the best moments in the history of Total War ever, in my opinion, simply because it was so far outside what many of us would have ever thought possible when this series began. I mean, it's fantasy China, anointed in glorious, over-the-top Warhammer goodness. Should be incredible, so be there tomorrow. Gonna be a great show. But there will be plenty of time to talk about Cathay in the coming days. For now, I want to keep the focus on the new release date and give my thoughts on the decision to push back the capstone game of this trilogy into 2022. I'll start with some of the positives, just so I can avoid sinking into an unrecoverable depression. And I guess the simple crux of it is this. If Creative Assembly feels like they need more development time to do justice to the setting, then they should take that time. I don't think anybody wants Warhammer 3 to release in a horrid state riddled with bugs, half-baked mechanics, and poor unit rosters. It's extremely important that Warhammer 3 improves on major elements that have been criticized in games 1 and 2. They've said they're taking that feedback on board, they've stated unequivocally they're looking to make some of those features better, and I think siege battles are a prime example. If they aren't able to deliver there and noticeably improve major features like sieges, that will be a huge source of backlash. Considering they've had 5 years to implement a plan of action on that front, the fanbase just isn't going to accept a fresh coat of paint in Game 3. It can't be the same old with just some new factions and units. There needs to be meaningful improvements across the board. And if they feel they need an extra few months to make those requests a reality, then so be it. It's also important to remember that Creative Assembly is made up of real, living, breathing people just like you and me. I know it can be kind of tempting to forget about that and think of organizations as these shadowy conglomerates looking to devastate the world while they make a quick buck, but many of these employees are huge fans of the setting and just want to make the game as good as physically possible. So if this helps them avoid a disgusting case of crunch and they don't have to kill themselves down the home stretch, then awesome. Reasonable working conditions and a decent work-life balance are things most of us should probably be able to get behind. Also, Warhammer 3 won't have to compete with juggernauts like Battlefield 2042 or Halo Infinite during the holiday season now. Obviously, it's a grand strategy RTS, it's a completely different genre than the FPS games I just mentioned, but I can guarantee there are plenty of Battlefield fans and Halo fans in this community here, and funds and free time are sometimes somewhat limited for working adults, so it's not the worst thing in the world that it won't have to directly face off against all these major titles coming out at the end of the year. But you know that age-old adage, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad? I get what it's saying in principle, and certainly there's an element of truth to it, but the reality is that it just depends. It's very much a simplified response to a complex issue that changes entirely depending on which game or developer is involved on the project in question. Sometimes delays kill all the momentum a title has, and it never manages to recover after continuously getting kicked down the road or left in limbo. Think about how many games have languished in early access never to get a legit full release. Sometimes, like in the case of Cyberpunk, 3 or 4 or 5 delays end up not doing a goddamn thing, and devs reach a point where they can't keep delaying it, and it still ends up an atrocity on launch day. game delays don't suddenly make games good, even if months and years of extra time are poured into it, and we've been waiting a long-ass time for Warhammer 3. I honestly think we are significantly past the time this game would have released in a normal world without Kofizi. I feel quite confident in saying that Game 3 has probably been delayed internally at least once before this, due to the pandemic. I mean, this global situation started for most Western countries in early 2020, and the decision to push back release this time was clearly made relatively recently. But everybody started working from home back a year and a half ago, and regardless of whether they ever admit to it or not, there's simply no way the transition from office work to homework, especially for a project this complex, went smoothly enough for their timings to not have been dramatically affected. I truly think we could have had this game 6 to 8 months ago easily in a normal world. So yeah, they've had internal delays that we've not heard about before. This is just the first time it's being made publicly known. 4.5 years between Game 2 and Game 3, when it was a year and a half between Game 1 and Game 2, well, the writing's kind of already on the wall on that front. It just doesn't add up. No matter how many features or mechanics you throw into it, that math does not work unless they've already delayed it before. So as a content creator for this series that focuses on Total War, I just want to say a 3 to 5 month delay freaking sucks, dude. Incredibly disappointing news from the YouTube side of things. Warhammer 2 is a fantastic game, and I am not done with it yet, not by a long shot, but I've been covering it for 4 years now. I've experienced most of what it has to offer. Creator burnout is very much a real thing. No matter how much you love a particular title, no matter how passionate you are about the setting, make enough content for the very best game with the most replayability in the history of ever, and it will still grind you down at some point. You will still want to move on to something new and fresh and more exciting. That's kind of how I've been feeling with Warhammer 2 recently. That's why I haven't been uploading it quite as much, just for my own sanity. I can't do what I do every single day for months on end for one single game that I've been covering for 5+ years when you include Game 1 too. That creative spark just drains out of you sometimes. It's not to say it doesn't come back, because it totally does. I've gone through spurts like this and feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome and all kinds of negative thought patterns over the last 5 years, and that's okay. That comes with the territory. You sit down, you grind through it, you make it work, you find that spark again. And remember that what you're doing is kind of awesome, and it's a privilege and can be super fun. And it is super fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything except maybe a McLaren and a French chateau. But this extra 3 to 5 months is going to be painful to get through. My content plans are kind of in disarray at the moment, considering both Darktide and Warhammer 3 were originally supposed to come out this year, and we still don't have a release date for either one of them other than sometime in 2022. Financially, this also sucks, big time. Ideally, we would have had Warhammer 3 by early November, and the first DLC, probably Chaos Dwarfs, by Christmas time, during the 2 most important months of the year in terms of revenue. November and December are when ad rates skyrocket. January, February, and March are typically horrendous months in terms of ad revenue. So basically, the same amount of time, effort, and energy put into the same amount of videos is half as impactful if it comes out next year as opposed to at the end of this year. If that. Which may not matter to most of you, because most of you don't make YouTube videos for a living, but for someone like me, that can be a kind of painful situation. I don't think anybody enjoys putting the same amount of work in to make half as much. So even if it doesn't affect you personally, perhaps it's a situation you can empathize with all the same. So I guess the major question is, when will it finally release? Based on what we know, I think this game was originally slated to drop in mid-November and just got kicked back into March of 2022. If that holds true, that will be roughly a 4-month delay, which means 2022 will be an incredible year for both fantasy and 40k video games, with both Warhammer 3 and Darktide coming out maybe back to back. 2 of the most anticipated titles in Games Workshop history landing alongside each other. Hopefully not that much overlap, because I'd like to cover both and don't want to have them competing at the same time, but either way, super looking forward to it. Am I a fan of this delay? Absolutely not. For purely selfish reasons, I absolutely hate it. Do I understand why the decision got made? Yes, of course, and I would expect any developer worth their salt to do the same thing 10 out of 10 times, but for obvious reasons, I am skeptical about what this delay will actually accomplish. All we can hope is that the extra time in the oven will lead to a better final product, and that this 4.5-year gap between Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3 will ultimately be worth the long wait. Tune into my channel tomorrow for the worldwide premiere of Cathay. It is going to be awesome. I am incredibly hyped. You guys should be as well, and I will see you then.